Hello, I'm Harrison Fletcher. I love talking to people and I love my industry. So I wanted to be a little bit selfish. I wanted to start a podcast that felt like an open but honest conversation, one that explores all sides of the industry. This podcast gets very real very fast. It's open, it's honest, it's vulnerable. It's for you. Welcome back to Season 2. We've got a very special guest.
Yeah.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Zade Film Co. Zade Cross.
Zade Film Co. Official. Zade Film Co. At me. Please look at me. Let's address the elephant in the room. We are good pals outside of doing podcasts and filming.
Yeah.
I think it'd be nice to talk about like first impressions of one another.
I can't remember when it was. It's a fair amount of years. It didn't feel like that long ago.
A few years. I think we first started chatting in around 2021.
2021, yeah.
I feel like that way.
Yeah.
Because you were just like begging me on Instagram, like, please, just please follow me back. Oh, dear. Well, my first impression of you actually dates back before that.
Yeah.
So I actually was a big fan of your work. You know all this, but
Yeah.
I was a big fan of your work before you even interacted and we started chatting through Instagram. I always
Thanks,
I think weirdly, I found you through Facebook.
Oh,
It must have been through Wedding Filmmakers, like, you know, one of the pages,
Oh,
one of groups.
the group.
I think that's how I found you. And then I started watching your videos that you used to put on Facebook. And then obviously, when Instagram were a big thing, obviously you got back on Instagram and I was stalking you on there. So that's that.
Yeah, and the rest is history.
The rest is history.
Yeah,
I guess let's transition then. Let's move into like, because obviously we shoot together quite a bit. I shoot for you, you shoot for me occasionally when you fancy. So how and why do you think we work so well together? Like, do you think there's a reason for that?
I think that's a really good question. I think like in terms of like how we work very similar, don't we?
Yeah.
I think it's work ethic. We work very, very hard when we're shooting on the day. And I think from a creative aspect as well, like setting up lots of additional cameras and sort of trying to visualise how we're going to capture the day as creatively as possible, I think is quite similar. But and just like I think I said about it previously, we've spoke about it a lot, but how we kind of don't stop. You know, we just keep going and we don't necessarily... Well, I think we do shoot for the edit, but I think we just keep going. We don't stop. We're not like, I don't need this. It's like shoot as much as you can, so you've got as much footage in the edit to play around with. I'd always rather have more than, you know, get to the end of an edit and be like, or get to the editing stage and be, I haven't got enough here, or I wish I'd done a bit more there. And I think you're very similar in terms of that when we shoot together. And I think it works really well. I just think from a personality perspective as well, you know, we like to have a little bit of banter along the way. Yeah. A little bit.
A bit too much from one argue.
Yeah. But we get the job done, don't we? We have
that's
amazing
it.
banter and we get the job done. And I think that's a really good
it's key. Yeah, I think it's key. Just to echo what you were saying, I think like in the early days when we first ever shot together and worked together, I shot with you, and instantly we were just like so in tune. We were like covering each other's backs without having to say anything. It was like just... It
was a huge event, I think.
Multi-day.
Yeah. And it was just the scale of the event as well. Like what was happening throughout the day was mental. We had like a drone team with us as well, didn't we? Working with us. And it just worked, didn't it?
Yeah,
like,
it just came together, Because that was my first proper time. It was my first proper time second shooting, and it was my first time working on an event that was so... like off the charts, huge event. Like it was a big one. I knew it were important to you, and instantly, we just kind of like clicked and worked, smashed it, did a good job.
Yeah,
and I think we were like, we should like tap into this, use it more.
We just hit the ground running, didn't we?
Yeah.
And like the content that I got back from that was just amazing. Like we both just did amazing, and it was a big gig. But yeah, it just worked, didn't it? Straight off the bat, it's like it just felt natural, like to work together and stuff, and almost like you can kind of you're like preempting what each other are thinking it sounds in a bit of a weird way. It's like, you know, have you done that? It's already been done, or
little stuff. I think that's what makes the difference as well, is because I always used to say to Zade that because I had never second shot before, I was always a solo shooter. I think that really does help. When you do go to second shoot, 100%. Like it makes the lead shooter think, bloody hell, like, because I was doing all the things that a lead shooter would do, but I was only second shooting.
Yeah.
So we were like 10 steps ahead. just to blow me on trumpet and that.
Yeah, no, I think that's what creates such a good partnership, isn't it? If you're like a really good solo shooter, not necessarily a second shooter, you're a good solo shooter.
Yeah, that's what I'm
and you
trying
can
to say.
handle all of that pressure that you kind of, because it's like when you work together, really, I wouldn't say anybody's a second shooter. You're both leading in a sense, aren't you? You're both lead shooters.
Yeah, different aspects of the day. You both at some point will be the lead shooter for whatever aspect that may be. Yeah. So we're gonna go back in time, life before weddings.
Okay.
So don't go to like you were 1 year old. I want to know what.
Full life story.
What were you doing before weddings? And I guess obviously, we'll leave it at that for now.
Do you want me to talk you through like the route that got me into the weddings, or do you want to hear about like,
you
what
can
job?
You can do because that's like the next question. So like it's like life before weddings, and then I was going to ask you how you then got into weddings and why you got into weddings. So I guess you can merge that question into one.
Yeah. So so I was working in IT doing. I was an infrastructure engineer. I went to uni and I did multimedia technology at university. Came out of university, didn't really know what I wanted to do. Ended up falling into IT. I
remember this 1960.
Yeah. Make me out to be mega old, you. Yeah. So came out of university, didn't really know what I wanted to do. Got an IT job and then ended up in IT for probably a good like 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
And I've always been mega creative and ended up doing a bit of DJing from my young age. My older brother was like a big into nightclubbing and stuff, so I ended up getting into DJing with my younger brother, and we used to play sort of out at different clubs and stuff at the weekends and produce. We used to make music in the week. We had all the gear, like a full studio of gear and stuff.
Yeah.
And then I just got a bit sick of that and the partying that goes along with it, staying up till 6 or 7 a.m. like on a Saturday and having to go into work on the Monday. Just knackered. So I sold a lot of my gear, all the production gear, and then I bought a drone. So I bought a...
Now I know you. Yeah. That is like such a Zade move. Because like, if someone might hear that and think that's really rogue, but trust me, that is like so you.
Yeah. It was weird. I bought this drone and I didn't really know. Like, it was literally like my young brother just suggested, like, buy a drone. Like, sell your gear. If you're selling your gear, you should buy a drone. Bought this drone.
Why not?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Bought this drone, started messing around with it, and then I was like, maybe I could get a license. And at that time, like, it was like, oh, like, is it hard to get a license?
Yeah.
Like,
when were this? What year, roughly?
This was 2015. Yeah,
what a guess.
Yeah, good guess. And then I bought this drone. It was like a Phantom with a GoPro strapped to the bottom of it, and I was flying it around the park, like local park, and just playing around, and then
taking out dog walkers.
Yeah, and then it like escalated from there. So I ended up getting a license, and then I set up Zade Aerial, and I was doing regular commercial bits and bobs, and then it was like, oh, I've got the drone. I'm doing this drone filming. It's like, oh, maybe I could do a bit of ground filming. So I bought a GH4, and then it just
spiraled
to snowball and snowball. And I think I did my first wedding in 2017. So like 2015.
Yeah.
To those 2 years.
Is that what you did full time then for those 2 years? Were you doing just the Zade Aerial stuff, or were you doing other
Zade
bits?
Aerial, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I shot like a wedding of a friend, but it was only with the drone, so it was literally like her arriving at the church, like super like,
full ceremony coverage.
But we didn't go into the church. We didn't film inside the church. It was literally like we filmed a little bit of the reception, but it was all drone stuff. And it just kind of escalated from there. We had Zade Aerial, and then the branding for Zade Aerial wasn't necessarily right, so it was like, oh, okay, maybe I should set up Zade Film Co. And then then I think I did a few weddings as Zade Aerial, but it didn't really fit with Zade Aerial didn't fit weddings. So then Zade Film Co. was set up, and 2017 did my first wedding. I think I had the GH5. Had tripods set up, we weren't filming handheld at that point. It was like tripods and panning and
the proper old school stuff.
Proper old school stuff.
Well, that would be old school now.
Yeah, we had a Ronin M, which was a big old Ronin, and the Inspire 2 at that point. And then it just, it's like whenever you get into anything, you just refine it, don't you? And the more you understand about the art form that you do in, it's like, oh, okay, so I need to change this and change that, and then it's just escalated from there. And it was there was a really nice point actually, and to look back. You know, when you look, a lot of the time when you look back, or if you're in the mix of your company, you're like, you know, not much has changed. But then if you look back 5 or 10 years, actually a massive amount has changed, and you've achieved a lot. But sometimes when you look back a small amount, or you're in the mix of that, you know, you think, oh, I've not necessarily achieved a lot here. But then I had a Facebook. I took a picture of this drone the first drone that I bought, and I had a Facebook memory come up, and it was of that drone. It was the photo, like when I'd first bought that drone, and it was like,
just takes you back to that time.
And like to you know,
see the progression.
To see the progression and how far you've come in that 10 years was like, oh, you know, that trigger point, that drone, from that point to how to end up, you know, at this point was like,
nearly
wow,
10 years later, it's spanned into this career. That like one decision to like spontaneously buy a drone, has led to this like, you know, career. It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a really cool point. But yeah, that's pretty much a short.
Just to wrap up the podcast there. Thank you very much. Not getting any time. How did the weddings come around? Like, you didn't like really touch on that. Like, how did you? Yeah. How were you marketing for them? And did you just shoot one for a friend and then it just spiraled from there? Like, how did it actually? Because obviously in the early days, it's a little bit different to what it's like now. Yeah. So that's maybe interesting.
Yeah. So I think initially it was like recommendations through friends, and then it would be a referral, and then you know, your name starts to just slowly get out there, doesn't it? The more you're in the mix and you're shooting a wedding here and there. I remember I used to do like exhibitions as well, so I'd pay to do a little exhibition, and that worked really well for a certain price point. Like, you know, I would go and do, I think I did a brides one as well. It was quite a big outlay to do it, and I had it was at the Excel Centre in London. Yeah. And I had like a whole like section done up. So my dad came down and like literally wallpapered this area, and it's like really sick. Yeah, so I had like a nice like sort of laminated sign put up, and had like plants and stuff in this area. So it felt like a little this little room. And
this pre-Zade Film Co. with Zade Aerial.
This was 2024. I'm going to say 18, at the end of 2018, and I just left my job. So I'd left my job in September 2018, and I was at the show. I think it was like pretty much when I'd left the job. Yeah, and yeah, so that was like
exciting times.
Yeah, really good, nice, really fun.
Well, obviously, I know you've done a lot of weddings over the years. You've shot in multiple locations all over the world. So my next little question is, what is like if you had to sum up the craziest wedding that you've shot in a sentence, what would that be? So that can be however you interpret it. So crazy bad or crazy good? Go crazy bad. People want to hear crazy bad.
Crazy bad. I mean, it was an amazing wedding. But I would say the bigger weddings are often logistically a nightmare, because there's, you know, more of you in the mix. And it was, I think York Minster was a tricky one, because we had like a number of things go wrong. We were still, you know, it was still fine, but on the day, I think we wanted to film the bride arriving at York Minster. We'd cleared it with their own police force that they've got on site. They've literally got their own police force on site. Cleared it with them on the day. I think Eric was there. No, you can't do it. Yeah. We'd managed to get some establishing shots and stuff, but we didn't actually get the bride arriving, which wasn't a massive, because we got like
it's not one of those things that's like a proper deal breaker, but it's something that creatively, I know what you like when you planning teams. Yeah, that it's like you have a vision and you want things covering.
Yeah, and it's just one of those days where I think they say like it comes in free. So I dropped my camera on that day and smashed one of my ND filters on like my 35, which is like my lens, like one of my go-to lenses. Fell off my shoulder at the reception, and then there was another thing. I think
Sorry, I should have got a vision of like you got like a camera on your shoulder like a parrot. You mean it more like a strap?
Literally on the strap. And then, I think there was an issue maybe with the sound tech, didn't want us to put a TX on the mic. But eventually it was okay. The owner came over.
Just these little things.
So it's just like a build-up of little things. And again, like the police, I'd cleared it with them, and it was like afterwards, I saw the guy that I'd worked when we went and did the establishing shots. We'd already worked there. We got up, just for everybody here. We'd got up, didn't we, at like 4 o'clock in the morning and shot a load of establishing shots. And that was just so it was like quiet, wasn't it? So we could do it without there being
and safe,
safe, And I saw the same guy, and it was like after the ceremony, I was like, "What's going on?" Like,
what did he say?
And he said, "Oh yeah, no, it's fine." And I was like, dude, like,
yeah. Tell him off. Get him sacked, the
like,
other guy.
Like, you just like, just blocked it. And then afterwards I came up to him, like, what's going on? We've had this cleared. And he was like, yeah, that's like, oh, okay, it's fine. And it's like, so.
Mixed communication then, innit?
Yeah, it's one of those things. And I think like when you get these big events like that and there's so many people in the mix, you can hit problems. And a friend of mine referred to it as you're a swan on top and then you're kicking your legs
like a duck like
below.
Yeah.
And I think that's an amazing analogy, isn't it? It's like kind of like
calm composure, but underneath you internally you're like really stressed. Yeah, it's a good way. That sums up weddings in general. To be fair,
it's never perfect, is it? We're I think as filmmakers a lot of the time we're chasing this perfection and it's never obtainable, so you've just got to go with it and adjust and adapt on the day.
Yeah. Have you got like a crazy like good experience then, something that like you went to and you're like, oh, this is mind-blowing, like I'm buzzing with this?
There's a couple of events that week that I spent in Scotland was
like,
obviously the first wedding that we did together was a absolute corker of a wedding, and then the second wedding was an absolute corker as well, and I remember not knowing exactly sort of how much of a corker it was, and then when I got there and I remember I went the day before the wedding or a couple of days before the wedding and had a look and I saw this glass house and I was like, wow, this is going to be insane.
Off the charts.
And it was like, that wedding was absolutely insane, one of my favourite weddings to shoot. And
why do you think that is? Do you think like, so do you get the enjoyment off of like a big budget wedding? Is that like fair to say?
I think so. I think if it's got all the bells and whistles, it is a little bit stressful when you're shooting it, but then when you get it back,
it's the payoff.
And you've got all of these different shooters doing different things. You've got these different angles and these creative angles. And I think coming from a background of a solo shooter that is like always pushing to get more out of it and do as much as you can as a solo, to having a team, and he's like, I've got this option, and you've planned out exactly what you're doing as a team, and then when it all comes together and you've got like angles of so many different creative angles. Again, it is a little bit overwhelming when you get to the edit, when you've got, I think we spoke about like those two weddings, the Scotland weddings. I think each of those weddings was over 2,000 clips.
Wow.
Across the board. So there's a lot to go through, but then actually it's like
piecing it together.
Piecing it together can be a little bit overwhelming, but it's amazing to have those things that you're striving for as a solo shooter, because you want that. And you know, like what we do, we get the drone up here and there when we're on our own and let it hover, and we'll add a push in post. And obviously when you've got a second, they're doing like more like movement and creative angles, and it just it's really fun to have those options in post.
Obviously, I've seen that you've started to embrace some of the trends that we're seeing crop up, like Super 8 and like the camcorder stuff. So just quickly, like how I've seen, obviously you're doing a little bit of this. Like how and why, and just update us, mate.
So with that, I think it's just a case of this year I've been trying to do stuff differently, like to not be stuck in that kind of rut of like, you know, doing the same thing. I think when we're shooting like in the confines of a wedding, it's a lot of the time you just get sort of comfortable doing what you know is safe and tidy, and it's just that quest of like, what can I do that's different? What can I do that's not necessarily, you know, and it's not necessarily fun at the time, a lot of the time as well. Like, you know, when you've got like a Super 8 camera on you, you've got like you've got two other Sonys on you, and it's like, it's
just the camera,
and you're trying to get used to the Super 8 stuff, and you're not yet 100% familiar with it, and it's like, but I quite enjoy that in the same sense, and like when you get stuff back, and I believe personally that, you know, all the stuff, all the hard stuff, all the most difficult stuff is where the good stuff is, you know, pushing yourself and being like how we've brought in gimbals, and we usually just shoot handheld all the time. Like that has absolutely changed the game in
massively.
Terms of like the content now that we're delivering and what you can do with it. So it's the same really thing with Super 8 and
I guess how you're looking at it then, you're looking at it like how sort of a builder would approach looking at like a load of tools. Like they don't need all those tools to do the job, but all those tools used on the job would arguably make it easier, better, like a better product.
See, I think it's just that collage of stuff, isn't it, to throw into the mix, and just like the more things you can throw in, the more variety, isn't it? It's the same with focal lengths as well, isn't it? You know, it's like it's really easy to shoot on like a 50 all day or shoot on a 75 all day. Well, it's not easy, but you get used to that focal length. And
I definitely think like saying it's easy is a fair thing to say. You know, it's fair to say there's stressful points of a wedding.
yeah,
But if you're just shooting mainly on one camera body and one lens, and you're not swapping out lenses,
yeah,
all you're worrying about is, you know, changing your batteries.
yeah,
That is,
it's nice.
it's quite of a chill, good experience. Which some may argue, well, why aren't we doing that then?
Yeah.
Why are we making it harder
Yeah.
for ourselves? You know.
Again, it's that variety, isn't it? It's,
Yeah.
you know, it's that variety of focal lengths. It's having that mix in when you come back to the edit. And I think like every focal length kind of tells its own little story, doesn't it? You've got wide stuff where, you know, you can get a little bit closer to the subject, and
Yeah.
it's like, and you can see a bit more about what's in the frame. And I feel like a 75 or a 50, it tells a different story, doesn't it? It's more of a sort of like almost withdrawn documentation of what's happening, whereas a 24 or 35, when you're closer to the subject,
Closer, yeah.
it feels like you're there, doesn't
It both plays a part.
Yeah.
I think like an 85, you are physically further away.
Yeah,
Whereas with like a 24 or a 16 or something super,
yeah,
super, you know, wide, you are physically closer, meaning that the emotion is going to be that much more, I would argue, like immersive, because
Immersive,
you're
yeah.
in, you're experiencing it almost,
yeah.
like as your eye would see it, you know.
Yeah, but like I love my 75 and I love my 50. I think they're fantastic lenses, but yeah, I
Time
don't know,
and
it's just
place.
nice to mix it up again. Like
Yeah, and I think it's down to like the type of shooter that you are. I think certain people actually, like for me, I actually enjoy changing lenses. Like
Yeah.
that sounds really weird to say, but I enjoy thinking, right, speeches now, 135's going
Yeah.
on, and like and I'm mixing it up. I feel like I'm doing, I don't know, I'm telling a good story. I feel like I'm making a film. You know, it feels
yeah,
more authentic.
yeah, I think that's definitely a good point. But it's just fun again, isn't it, to use like to try and master different focal lengths as well, and learn what works best, you know, for that scenario and what works
Yeah.
best for that scenario. Obviously, for the ceremony, you probably don't want to be on a 24 or you know, a mega
3 feet from the
you know,
face.
16 mil, yeah, because you're going to have to be too close. But and I think that's fun, exploring like what works within a scene or a scenario of a wedding. Like, oh, okay, right. So if it's like the vows, you probably want to be on 50, 75. Maybe you could even be 135 if it's a big church.
It's
But then for a party, it's like, you know, for the dancing, you would probably want to be on like a 24 or a 35 and be in the mix, be in the action, because that's going to give that vibe of, you know, being in the mix and being sort of that. I think we spoke about earlier, that immersive vibe. A 75 is still amazing for that, because with the 75 you can pick off details, can't you, which we've done, like and stack it with the 35. But I feel like if you shot like a whole load of dancing on just the 75, then I feel like you're kind of missing the trick in terms of like what vibe you can bring.
That's
like,
what I'm going to say. I feel like our lens choice typically sort of reflects the story, I guess. So like what's happening, it matches the emotion, I would say. So like when people are dancing, we're super wide and we want to capture it and be in the mix. Whereas when it's a bit more emotional and a bit more serious, we kind of take a step back and sort of, you know, we're peering into the story.
You're looking in, and I think the longer lenses as well, they isolate the subject a bit better, don't they? So it's like there's emotion there. Okay, right, I want to draw out the emotion. Who am I focusing on for this emotion?
Yeah,
okay,
bridegroom. Yeah.
If there's, you know, a VIP that you're turning back and shooting, I do prefer this using a 75 for the ceremony, because again, when I'm spinning and capturing like the VIPs with a 50, it still works with a 50, but you see more people in that stack.
People,
So it's like you can't pull out that emotion as much.
Yeah, just depends, I guess. Yeah. So that leads us on nicely, I think, to talking about your sort of, I'm going to say it's your catchphrase. It's not your catchphrase.
Yeah.
But like, I know that you often say, you talk about like creativity versus coverage. It's in the guide. We'll come on to that later on.
Yeah.
Just to tease it there, teasing people, reel him in. But yeah, so explain, I guess, the sort of concept behind creativity versus coverage.
When you're filming a wedding, you don't necessarily want to miss a moment. But I feel like if you're thinking creatively, you can squeeze that moment harder to get more creative shots for your edit, for your highlights, and for your feature.
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
You know, you can hold your camera on a particular moment and think, okay, I'm going to get that moment. You know, I've got that moment. Like for 10 or 15 seconds, or you can think, as you're shooting, you can go, right, okay, I've got like 3, 4, 5, 6 seconds. Okay, what can I move and get something else now? So I've got a little sequence there.
Yeah.
Or like there's stuff like, when the bride's coming down the aisle, if it's an outdoor ceremony, if it's just me shooting on my own and it's a big ceremony, then maybe I can get the groom as well. Squeeze the groom's reaction in as well. Quickly, before she's coming to the aisle. Get that shot, and then I start getting a bit of a sequence. So it's like trying to, you can just hold that shot on the ceremony, can't you? You could,
of course, you can.
Stand there and wait for the bride.
I feel like you really do push it at weddings in terms of like trying to squeeze the max amount out of the situation as possible.
And I think we do that as when we work together as well. Don't we? We'll have sometimes, we'll have a lot of cameras set up.
I'm sure you will have had this before, but I've had people comment before saying like, oh, did you have a second on this? Or like, oh no, totally solo shot, and you'll have had that as well. And they're like, God, like, how did you? How was the drone up there and how was that camera over there? And it's just like
spinning plates.
Literally, like, I feel like we make it harder by sort of. I mean, you're always having to be a couple of steps ahead at a wedding, regardless of how you shoot. Yeah. But I feel like us, especially how we shoot. Mate, we arrive when we're at home. We're that far ahead. We're trying to be that that efficient with time. I think it just makes for a cool sequence. Like I said, it makes for a cool sequence, cool films. It elevates it. I feel.
Yeah.
It makes it look like it's got more production because it's covered from all these extra angles. It looks like it automatically elevates it to just the ordinary standard way of shooting.
You've hit the nail on the head there. Like when you're working as a solo shooter, what you're trying to do is you're trying to portray more cameras, aren't you? You're on your own. I think it's that change in mindset, isn't it? It's being like, right, how much can I get out of this for the edit? Like how many clips can I creatively sneak out of this edit, out of this scene, out of this moment, to give myself like a stack of 3 or 4 different like parts of a sequence, and then you can piece that together, and that just, I feel like it has more continuity, doesn't it?
100%.
Like it adds depth to the edit. The more weddings you shoot, it's like, oh, how can I strategically get more out of this like moment?
Yeah.
Like what I mentioned about the groom. Like what I'll often do when the bride's coming down the aisle is I know that the groom's going to see the bride before she enters the aisle, so I'll capture that.
Yeah.
And then I know that, I'm probably not, when she comes down the aisle, I'm probably not going to use... the
entire wall.
No, and I want her in amongst the aisle. I don't want her outside of the aisle.
You don't want it to be sort of at the end or like at the sort of where the groom is. You want the nice middle bit where the flowers are nice, everyone's in frame, looking at her, and you kind of want that few moments. It's a few steps, really, isn't it?
Yeah. So basically, this was in Los Angeles, and like, I remember they... it was
a good wedding. That I remember seeing the film.
It's one of my favourite shots that I've ever shot. And I remember seeing
the doors were closed. Any excuse.
The doors were closed, and I could see a crack through the door. And I mentioned this in the guide. I could see a crack in the door, and I could see the light for outside.
Cheeky little mention again. It's coming up, we promise.
I could see the light outside, and the safest thing to do would probably be to expose for the inside and just let her come in and get that aisle shot. And I was like, right, okay. And I don't know what it was. It's just intuition. And I think this is where you've got to follow it and be like, right, I'm going to take this risk.
Take the risk.
Because it comes up in your mind, and you've got the pressure of the wedding on top of you, and it's like, oh, okay, right, I've got this chance to try something.
And you can either
push, or you can go, no, I'm just going to expose.
Play it safe.
Play it safe. And I was like, right, I'm dropping the exposure. So I literally dropped the exposure right down. I could just see the crack, and I was like, I don't even know if this is going to be in focus. They might be stood further back. And then I remember the doors opening. I'd expose to the outside through the crack, and it just looked so epic.
It's a good shot, really good shot.
And I was so happy with that shot, and then so happy that I took the risk.
And you did. But
then, like, going back, it's never perfect. And I think if you take these risks, it doesn't often, sometimes it doesn't work out, and you end up with nothing. I remember she came in. I was on like a 75, and the aisle weren't mega long, and I was like, I'm going to risk this for a biscuit. So I was like, I got her coming in. I was like, I'm going to get him as well. So I quickly turned and got him, and then I turned back, and by the time she sort of came down the aisle, I didn't get much because I was manual focusing, rolling on a 75mm. I was shallow as well, so it was like I didn't get a great aisle shot. But then what I did get was that entrance, and that over the aisle shot.
And that, I guess, is from everyone else's perspective that was a guest there, that would have been their first impression, I guess.
Yeah.
And she wouldn't have been able to see that, but you sort of were able to deliver it.
Yeah.
Just while we're on this topic, though,
Yeah.
I've got a bit of an anecdote, a story to tell.
Go on then. Yeah.
About when taking risks doesn't work.
Okay.
It involves one of your weddings that our
Yeah.
second shot at. Do you know which one I'm going to talk about?
I think I know which one. Yeah, when we had about yeah. I think we were
People listening will just think, "What the hell did you just do?"
very lucky there, weren't we?
Very lucky. So me and Zade, we were shooting in Tuscany for one of Zade's weddings, and typical when we're working together, as we've mentioned, we try and push the boat, try and push the boundaries, I guess, of like what is achievable. And Zade's idea was to, I put it on Zade, it was Zade. Zade's idea was to get 2 drone shots of, basically after the ceremony, there were going to be these confetti sort of cannons that were coloured, that were going to go off behind the couple. It was a really awkward angle to try and get because the couple was sort of getting married on like almost like a balcony with a roof. So you could see outside, but obviously from an aerial perspective, there was a roof covering it with like gaps in it. So the plan was to shoot it from the other side. So we were just filming the sort of cannons,
Yeah.
and then that were going to be it, but with 2 drones. So one of the drones were going to be static, getting a safety. The other drone was going to be moving, getting like a sweeping shot.
Yeah.
That was the plan, weren't it?
Yeah.
But this was like during obviously a ceremony, so it was my job to get the drones up. I held my hands up, you know. So I ran to the drones. It was just about to happen.
Close. It was close.
I got one drone up, which was my drone, which was the sort of static drone, and then I just got Zade's drone up just in time for him popping. I was very lucky because my drone must have been a centimetre
Oh, mate,
away from being obliterated.
That was really close. That was.
It
Like,
was super close, and then
I remember.
then the couple was then
seeing
immediately
it on camera and being like, "Whoa, that was close."
Yeah.
Like.
And then immediately the couple were then walking down the aisle. I think it were confetti. Were it? It were.
Yeah.
They were throwing confetti
Yeah,
down the
leaving-
aisle straight
yeah.
away, pretty much.
Yeah.
Near enough straight away as soon as those cannons went off. So obviously one drone's just floating there, basically covered in like purple dust, sort of written off for the next 10 minutes. And then the other drone, I just got Zade's other drone up. Obviously I'd missed it with that one, so I was like, right, I'll just try and adapt to you.
Yeah.
From an aerial perspective, when you looked down at the sort of aisle, there was like 3 gaps in the
This is great. No, you just reminded me of what you're talking about.
Yeah,
This
so there
is
was like
great.
3
This
gaps in the sort of balcony on the roof, so you could see the couple sort of walking down the aisle through one of these sort of square gaps. So I just thought, oh bugger it, I've sort of missed out on this opportunity, but the drone's there, I can see that they're walking down. I'm just going to point it down bird's eye view and just get this shot.
Yeah.
And I remember you ended up using that and you liked it and stuff. I mean, it weren't the shot that you wanted, and the story is a bit sort of like do take risks but sort of don't. I think it's sort of just knowing
where the limits are.
where the limits are, and I think that we're a good learning curve for us because we learned, right, maybe 7 cameras and 2 drones
Yeah,
isn't the way to do it.
Maybe we've gone a bit. Maybe we've
Too
crossed
far
the
on that
line
one.
a little bit there.
But what we were, it's just knowing what's achievable. I think that's like a good way to summarise it, because like I don't want to sort of come across like we're being like, oh, we take risks and we're such mavericks, and like
No.
we're always
doesn't always work out.
it doesn't always work out, and I think that's just part of a job. It's part of a job. Any job that you do, there's always parts of it where
It's not going to work out.
you know you get fired, for example.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I think
the other thing I just want to quickly touch on is
Yeah.
I don't
Go
want
on.
to forget about talking about this, because we were talking about like when you were talking about the ceremony stuff that you did with the the silhouette, the door opening, all that stuff.
Yeah.
I think what we do a lot of, what maybe isn't sort of done a lot in the industry, is we try to sequence and max out sort of the key points of the day as well as the other points of the day that are typically sequenced. For example, what I'm trying to say is like during reception, for example, a lot of people will sort of try and make a sequence out of like, say if you've got a group of people talking, you'll go around that circle of people getting like a sequence, and you might get a wide shot of them talking. So in the edit, you've got like a wide shot of them talking and some closer people laughing within this circle. So it's like a sequence of people chatting,
Yeah.
which is I would say a super easy thing to do. It's nice for the film. There's no wrong with it, but it's like an easy thing to do amongst a more relaxed part of the day. But I think we try and implement that into a ceremony, into a speeches, into a first dance, into some
That's
sort of
right.
like entrance into a room, for example. It's always multi-coverage, and we really try to... That's what it boils down to, I guess, isn't it? In its simplest form. The one that we shot in Scotland, that was crazy. Like we had like
Seven cameras.
Seven.
Yeah.
But that including drones, weren't it? So that's 7 total.
3 drones.
3 drones. The
Three
drone
drones,
team.
yeah. Drone
Howard
team.
safety drone.
I think the drone team, they, I think, actually thought of the idea of the safeties, and I've almost carried that over into other parts of the when shooting weddings. They were like, we were talking about it on the pre-wedding call, and they were saying like, oh yeah, we can have the Inspire up, and we'll just put like the Mavic 3 Pro and have that hovering somewhere as a safety shot. And I was like, that's an amazing idea.
Yeah,
it's like a big tripod, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, covering different, and they had that for the marching band as well, didn't they? They had like a safety shot. And I remember when we shot that marching band, I was actually able to create a full
that was really good. That was
full
sick.
multicam out of that. And we didn't plan for that, did we? But because we had all of those different options, I think you were on the gimbal,
yeah.
I was on like a 75 and a 135, switching between shooting like detail-y things, and
2 drones up, I think.
And two we had the safety drone, and they had the Inspire 3 moving around.
Moving.
And it just cut together really well. Like, it was really fun to have those options.
That probably sparked for both of us, but probably for you initially. It really sparked like that thing of like squeezing. That's probably where that was born.
Yeah.
The sort of maxing each moment.
More.
I want coverage of everything.
I want 17 cameras. No,
get a GoPro in the corner of every single room.
Yeah.
CCTV shots. But yeah, so while we're sort of talking about like drone teams and things, a nice transition I think could be to for me to talk to you about like working in teams versus working solo. I know these days you mainly try to work in teams, like that's the go-to. But yeah, how and why do you prefer to work? Do you prefer to work in teams or solo, or
I'd say
both pros and cons. But I guess what do you?
I definitely prefer working in teams for the fact that you've got that camaraderie. You're working. You're almost spreading the load of the pressure of a wedding.
Yeah.
And again, it's having those creative options as well in the edit, which we spoke about. Like once you get those creative options, it's like, when you go back to soloing, it's like, I kind of,
you feel like you're missing out almost.
Shot of the groom, or like, I wanted this and I wanted that, and it, I spoke to somebody in the industry, and they were like a proper solo shooter, and they've started using seconds, and he's like, Zade, what have you done? Like, he's like, I'm enjoying having that second, like, and I feel like it is like that once you have all those options, especially like having a drone team has just been like, they're maybe a little bit overkill at points, but then like the options that you get when stuff's outdoors,
it sounds quite intimidating as well. I just want to say like when Zade's saying like a drone team, it's really, although they're using the Inspires, which are huge drones, but like compared to what wedding filmmakers use, but like they're miles away parked in a car, like they're not like, it's 2 guys.
Subtle, and I think that type of wedding
needed it. It almost needed it.
It had all the bells and whistles, but you probably we've shot a lot of weddings where we just pick up the drone and we kind of incorporate, and that works.
Yeah, that works as well.
Perfectly well. Like,
I think when you've had the taste of having a second, that when you then go back to soloing, you try and, I think you mentioned this before, but you're trying to like. You want, because you know that you can have that and that's an option.
Yeah, no, this is true.
You try to stretch yourself to the point of shooting what a second would and what you would normally do. And I think that's maybe as well how this sort of like pushing the boundary was born in both of us. Because when we sometimes can't have a second, we're both trying to like really like trying to push for covering all these angles and doing it as creatively and as like coverage heavy as possible, I guess.
Yeah. I think as solo, like even shooting solo as well, pushing, like getting the drone up for fireworks, like chucking it up for, like 2 or 3 minutes before, turning it around, pointing at the venue, running behind the couple, like, and like having a static set up on the front of the couple, and then you're kind of behind the couple with a wider lens. It's like trying to just squeeze as much as you can out of it. But then when you get when you get 2 or 3 of you, then it's like, what can we do here?
You sort of run out of things to do because there's like there's too much, like there's too many cameras an option, and you're like, this is just going to be overkill to make more work for myself. I'm just going to segue into probably what everyone is here to hear about, to be honest, which is your new venture with your online store, your new products. Obviously recently the guide. So obviously, just tell me about it. Like, how did it start?
Yeah.
All that stuff. Like, let's go in depth.
Let's go in depth. I think it was originally going to be like a handbook, and it was maybe going to be like 20 pages long, and I was going to kind of design it myself and just put as much information in there as possible. And I started working on it, and I think it's this thing of, you know, chasing perfection and wanting stuff to be, you know, like I want the information, obviously the information, I want the information in it to be good, but also visually I want it to be like top notch. And I'm not like a graphic designer, you know, so it's like, I started writing it, and it was going to be just a shorter handbook, and then it's ended up into this guide, which is like 125 pages long. And I've used the designer that has helped do all my branding for my website and my brochures, and so it's kind of all in line with that. And he's like super talented, and he's done an amazing job at it. So we've been, I think that's one of the things that's made the process a lot longer, because it's like going back and forth and collaborating with the designer and giving him the information and getting him to kind of work that into the design and stuff. And, you know, even just, I remember just exporting like all my imagery, like for the design, for the guide. That took me about 3 or 4 days just to go through all my weddings and export
all of your like body of work to make sure you got like the right imagery. And
I was originally just like, oh, I'm gonna, you know, just export the best stuff. And I was like, but then I don't know for the guide what images I'm going to use. So I was like, okay, I can't shortcut that. I've literally got to export
everything,
like cocktail hour, loads of cocktail hour, like loads of ceremony stuff, and create these buckets of, you know, imagery for it. So that took a lot of time. And then writing it as well, I've just tried to just like put as much information in it as I can. So there's just to give you a little lowdown of what's included, there's a technical section, so that's got like camera settings. I originally put the Sony camera settings in, and I was like, you know, with my mentoring I gave away my Panasonic settings, so I was like, okay, maybe
just include it,
give both. And then it's got stuff which is about shooting in log. That was a big thing for me, switching over. I remember I was shooting on the Panasonic on like a built-in, bit like Cine 4 basically. And then I switched to log, and that was kind of a big like learning process with log and shooting with that, and how to shoot properly so you get a decent image back. So I've put a lot of that information in there. There's a film overview section, so that's got like discussions about working in a team. And I think that throughout the brochure, the guide, it talks about areas where you kind of work in a team as well. So a lot of it is focused on working solo, but then it refers to teamwork and how you can adapt certain parts of the day and work in a team.
So like what we've discussed today.
What we've discussed,
but like it explains it in a much better way than what we do in real life.
So there's mainly, it's a technical section. There's a filming overview, which discusses like, you know, filming with a drone, filming with a gimbal, shooting for Instagram. I think that's like, I thought that was super important, being able to shoot for Instagram, but also able to adapt the footage that you do shoot for your landscape stuff and
as well.
And have that work for Instagram
alongside,
as well.
Which is mega, obviously that's mega important now with like TikTok and Instagram. Like, that's where the advertising is, and like it sucks that that's what you've got to do on a wedding, that you've got to be thinking all day, as well as what we've just previously discussed about covering all these angles. You've also got to be thinking, I also need to make sure I get some like portrait stuff as well for Instagram and TikTok, because obviously that's where you're advertising, that's where you're marketing. So it's a bit pants that you have to do that, but you know, it's one of them, innit, where you've just got to adapt, and
you have to adapt. And
I think that's what your guide is it's like everything you've learned, how you've overcome things. It literally features everything that I know that you know. Like, having worked with you a load of times, we've travelled around. Like we've shot weddings in England, Scotland, abroad, all over. So it's like and in the guide it has that. It has destination tips. It has literally everything in it. To the point that, like, I'm actually surprised you've been able to fit it in one guide. You should have milked it. You should have brought part 2 out.
I know. I think that is true, and I feel like you.
There's so much value to it. So it's really good. I've not seen anything that's like it. Some of my favourite sections are like how you've brought down, like where you've been a little bit more personal and talked about like how you shoot certain like segments of the day, like being, you know, obtrusive or non-obtrusive, like, because I think that's a whole other kettle of fish to talk about. But like, it essentially, like, we shoot quite sort of in both sides, but
both rounds.
We're not. We're on the fence.
We're not afraid to get in on the action.
Like we've said, I guess with the lenses, we're touching it with that. Like we do get in, but then there's moments like where we're stepping out of it. I think, and the best way I can explain it is 2 words.
Go on.
Common Sense.
Yeah.
That's my guide.
Yeah.
That's my guide by Harrison Fletcher.
But I think that's been a
Common Sense.
Yeah, Common Sense.
I'll sell it for a tenner.
Yeah, I think that in itself, of that way of shooting, has been a learning process. Because I remember thinking back to when I first started.
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah,
you were like a proper fly on the wall.
When you don't know, you don't know.
Yeah, and I was scared to go in the aisle for the aisle walk, and I was scared to go in the aisle at all. It was like, and I think it's been it's a learning process, and that's one of the things that I wanted to share in the guide, like what I've learned, shooting these weddings and obsessing over how we shoot these weddings. When we having calls together and talking about how can we do this and how can we get like, and it's like really obsessing over the little details, trying to kind of put that into the guide, and all those little nitty-gritty things, there's intricacies that you've learned along the way that writing the guide. I think that's why it got so long, because I was like, actually I've learned quite a lot here. Like,
I could have this, and
and then you just start. It's like a rabbit hole. I remember first, when I first started writing, I was like, how am I going to start this? And then once I got going, it was like, okay, I can put this section in. I could bring this in, and it's been like a really cool process to go through it. But it's also
been like quite good to look at your work as well, to like review it almost, and be sort of like thinking about how you used to shoot, and like thinking about how people will perceive what you're writing.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, it sounds obviously 125 pages. You think, Christ, like that's like near on a book. It is so easy to understand. There's loads of visual pages, and it's like there's visual breakdowns. It's not all like it's not just the Bible.
Yeah.
There's pictures to it.
Not just fully packed words. There's like diagrams. There's like camera breakdowns with imagery, and so I've tried to make it as visually. I think that's one of the things I was cautious with as well, like with packing in so much information in wording, that I wanted there to be sort of that break of inspiration where you could look at pages and be like, okay, this is what he's talking about. Yeah, this is what he's talking about,
and you can visually see it. Yeah,
we spoke about like coverage versus creativity. That's in there.
Yeah.
And like
that's a good section.
Yeah, you said you enjoyed that. Like that those bits, like how you can set yourself up to be more creative and stuff, and just those kind of, again, it's obsessing over that process, isn't it? How you can make it easier for yourself to give yourself what you need in the edit. Like, that's the whole. Like, that's the whole like quest, isn't it? Like how can we get better? Like how can we get? Yeah. That's what we're always chasing. So
I think as well, for a lot of people, just to like segue a little bit, a lot of people that are starting to get into destination weddings, I think this guide will really help them, because I think a lot of destination weddings that I shoot are typically international couples. And when I say that, mainly Americans. So it's mainly American couples that I'm shooting for. And I think they obviously, if they're booking you, they obviously like your work. But I think to a certain degree, the expectation there isn't to be as British in terms of how you're shooting. So I think like a lot of sections in your guide about how to shoot a wedding, and like not being afraid to be in the aisle, and certain things like that that destination couples, like Americans, international couples, they'll all not be bothered by at all. They actually almost would like appreciate it, anticipate it. They kind of want it. They want that shot. And I think even if you're starting to work with planners and things like that, they want those extra details. They don't want you to be someone that's like
complete fly on the wall.
A bit fly on the wall, yeah. And that's not to say that like if you're a more reserved person or you're a bit more shy, that
I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
That you can't get into doing it, or like that the guy's useless, because there's plenty of sections in it. There's 125 pages, so there's something for you. Let me tell you. So yeah, that's just like my sort of take on it. I think it's good for people that are sort of getting into that.
On top of the filming guide, we've got like a full breakdown of the day. So it's like literally establishing shots, bride prep, groom prep,
and that again, that's all visual. That's all images. It's all imagery, so you can see it. It not only inspires you if you go into a certain location where Zade's been. Like, it not only like inspires you to think, oh, I could get a shot like that, but like even it just gives you the sort of like running on a treadmill effect of like thinking, oh, like gets the ball rolling, gets you thinking, and thinks, oh, I could do this even in the UK and stuff, and just inspiration really.
Yeah, and I think our process, the way that we attack weddings is, I did say we kind of overshoot and stuff, but in a sense, it is quite methodical in how we break stuff down between us.
100%.
We'll be right, okay, you're on the wider lens because we know that I'm going to be on like a 75. So we've got that variety. Yeah. There's really big sections for the ceremony, which is obviously super important, and different attacks, plans of attack for the ceremony and for the speeches. Again, it's, you know, and for the ceremony and the speeches, there's like processes for shooting it solo, and then processes again, this layer of shooting it in a team as well. So if you bring somebody on board, you know, what can you do with that camera setup? What can you do for that extra bit of creativity to kind of squeeze it a bit harder if you've got a second person?
Yeah, I guarantee that there's sections within the guide that people will read that they won't even ever have thought about.
Yeah,
there'll be sections in it that like, I didn't even think about this. Like, this is such a good point, and like, yeah, I just think it's a great product. Zade has kindly giving away a discount code for the podcast. So for people listening that want to purchase it,
because I'm a big fan, Harrison, and I love you so much, and I love obviously the listeners. So it's Insight 50, and that gives you like a 50% discount off the guide as well. So it's limited on that as well. So you can get that. Just pop in Insight 50 into the shop when you check out. Besides me, what's your favourite part of the job? End of podcast. I would say like the shooting. We've spoke about this before. The shooting.
Yeah.
But then like the shooting, that pushing side and trying to get as much as you can, but also it's nice to just be in the mix and meeting people. That's an awesome part of it. And also, I think it's a bit of a love-hate thing with the editing. Like sometimes it goes well and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah,
but when it's going well and you feel like you've turned over every stone and you're into a project that's, you know, got you fired up. There's nothing like that, I think, in the editing stage.
Yeah. Sometimes you just do the. I think that's even
just clicks.
Same for the shooting. Like sometimes you're shooting away and you think, oh, today I just feel a bit like I'm slacking. I feel like I'm slow today. I don't feel like I'm quick today.
Sharp. Yeah.
I'm gonna take a dark turn.
Dark turn. Here we go.
So
what is it?
If you're comfortable in sharing one or your biggest mistake shooting wedding films or in this industry.
Okay.
Hiring me as a second.
Yeah. Worst decision. Worst decision I've ever made.
Decision.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, shooting live events.
Where do I start? There's loads.
Yeah. There is. Shooting live events is, you know, it's challenging, isn't it? I think when you've been shooting for 12, 14 hours, especially like towards the end of the day, I make mistakes. Like for dancing, I've got this habit of pressing record between.
Yeah.
You know, I'm delirious with tiredness. I'm like, I'll get back to the edit and there'll be a load of shots of my feet. And the annoying thing is, it's like you see yourself focus on the subject and you see yourself frame and then you're like, oh, this is good. And then it goes off.
It goes off.
When I first started, I remember probably the worst mistake that I've made is shooting a whole firework display through a drone, looking at the screen and being like, this looks amazing, backdrop, epic. This wasn't recently, by the way, just to...
Yeah. You said
wasn't last week.
This sounds like it is recently.
When I first started, but...
it's when I first started, I swear it was last week.
And I remember seeing it and seeing that I'd not pressed record on the button there. And it's one of those mistakes that you mistake and you make and you never make again. And I remember seeing it and my heart just sunk. I was like, oh, what have I done? And again, it's when a lot of the time the mistakes that I make are towards the end of the day because I'm just so tired.
Well, have you got any advice then for anyone starting wedding videography in 2025? Like what would be like the top advice that you'd give someone?
Potentially looking at maybe delivering shorter films where you can be more creative throughout the day and you're not bound by, as we spoke about coverage, being stuck in coverage mode, because I think there's nothing worse when you're stuck in that coverage mode. Yeah. Maybe set expectations with your couple in terms of what you can and can't do, and don't be afraid to set those expectations from the start. Yeah. Don't say you can, if you're just starting out, don't say you can deliver the full ceremony or, and maybe trim things down for the speeches, maybe, just set up one camera on the speaker for the speeches and try and break free from. I think there was in the industry a bit of a mold of this old school videographer where you've got to have lots of tripods set up and you've got to have all these different cameras set up for the ceremony and for the speeches. Maybe try and break free from that and just shoot creatively and as I say, set expectations with the couple with what you can do, and I think that will set you up for more creativity when you're shooting, and then more creativity for your edits as well. Yeah, the moment I guess that you stop offering ceremony and speeches in full, for example, it frees you up to cover it in such a more creative, different way, which will
changed the way that the film looks and feels.
Yeah.
The past few years I've always been like, is TikTok really going to be a thing? Is it actually where my market is? And all these questions that you ask yourself. And I think this year I'm really seeing that it is going that way. I really do believe that I think TikTok is going to be the new Instagram.
Yeah.
I'm putting it out there. Putting it out there to the world.
What do you mean by that? Do you mean that in the sense of like videographers being a lot more...
Whose podcast is this? Who's interviewing who?
Yeah.
No, I just think I think that's where the market is shifting to, in the same way that people went from Facebook to Instagram. You know, I used to purely advertise on Facebook and get all of my referrals and everything through Facebook. It was all Facebook back in like 2017. And then I remember like first going to no one would upload anything to Instagram. Uploading a film to Instagram were like for photos, like it would just for like uploading like a picture of your food or something. It weren't this big advertising thing that it is today. No blue ticks and all that stuff. So yeah, it will. The idea of like utilizing Instagram to promote, I was like, oh, like really? And then now it's like I wouldn't dream of not ever uploading to Instagram. It's like I even shoot for Instagram on the day sometimes at certain points. And I think we are seeing TikTok become this new way of like advertising. I think what people will start to use TikTok for is that TikTok will be the front. So like that's what people might engage with you if you're talking to camera and you know delivering information or whatever, or behind the scenes. People might go, oh, I want to see more. Click on the profile. Then there's obviously, you'd have your link there for Instagram. People then would go to your Instagram, see all your shop window, all the stuff that's like, ooh, this looks good. Yeah. And then hopefully from there click on your website. And then I think that's the new route of like marketing from what I perceive, from what I'm seeing. You know.
Yeah, it could well be, yeah. So you have your kind of
that's
your
my
more,
insight.
The more raw stuff on TikTok, and then potentially some
100%.
Your cleaner, polished films on Instagram,
and
then your longer films then on your website.
Yeah,
it's crazy, isn't it? When you think
it's like a domino effect. It's like a build up, like of like, oh, we like this guy.
Yeah.
Oh, we like the work because the work looks really nice. We'll click on the link to the website. Oh, it's a nice website, and it seems like a normal human. Let's inquire.
Yeah.
It is a longer process these days, isn't it? And I think that's the way it's going. From what I see, I might be completely wrong. What is something that you're looking to improve over the next like 3 to 5 years? Like where's Zade Film Co. in 3 to 5 years' time?
That's a really tough question. I think that's
it's a scary question.
It's quite a deep question, isn't it? Improving. I've been looking at trying to improve like the customer process. Sounds really boring, but like I think you can improve across the board, but I think the customer process from when they inquire to to when you send your proposal to when you book them, that whole process, maybe refining that, and again when you deliver the films as well, trying to make that better and offer like a really outstanding service. But I guess from a filming aspect, just to continue embracing new things and not get stuck in that creative rut of doing the same thing. Like this year, what have I been doing? Like moving to DaVinci, writing this guide, just doing new things and keep pushing to do new things. Shooting Super 8, the camcorder stuff. To continue just to push and do new things and not sit in that safe space of creativity where you're ticking the boxes and you're not really pushing outside.
Yeah. Is that what you enjoy to do? You enjoy like pushing it?
I feel like at the time I don't necessarily enjoy it because it's change.
Yeah.
But then when you get the results back, and you see, and you're getting these new shots back, and I remember when switching from handheld to gimbal stuff was like, ooh, at the start, like, am I going to use this? Like you're thinking to yourself as you're shooting with it, and you look back now and it's like, yeah, I am going to use this because it adds that little bit of sparkle to the edits, doesn't it? Just like that subtle
elevates
movement, even for a candid and stuff. Just to like throw that in and that's a prime example of of doing new things, feeling a little bit uncomfortable with what you're doing and doubting yourself a little bit. That imposter syndrome kicks in. Yeah. But then once you get used to it, it's just another tool in your arsenal, isn't it? You're just like, right, I can do this now, and I know that works for that, and I think that's the key, just to continue pushing and adding to that toolbox of things that you can do. So yeah.
So I just picked up on a word there, and I hope you don't mind me asking you about this. Yeah. But I think there'll be people out there that would be very surprised to hear Zade Film Co. say the words imposter syndrome. So would you say that's something that you like experience?
Yeah, definitely. I think you're always your own worst critic, aren't you, when you're filming and you're shooting? And I feel like that can propel you forward as well, in the sense of, you know, it pushes you, that imposter syndrome, to try and do better. But yeah, I get it all the time when I'm shooting weddings. Like, even in the run up to the wedding, and especially, you know, this is something that I get after the wedding, when you're like when you're on a wedding hangover.
Yeah.
After a wedding, you're completely physically sapped, and I think you're emotionally sapped as well, aren't you? And at that point, it's like, oh, could I have done this? And it's all like Captain Hindsight, isn't it? That comes in, and you know, a lot of the time, it's when you get back to the edit and you get moving with it, it's fine. But it's and I think I've made that a thing. So like after a wedding, I won't hop in and look at the footage. Yeah, I'm always really eager to
have a look, to
hop in and look at the footage. But like, if you do that day after, your perception, for me anyway, I've got a bit more of a negative outlook than I would. I haven't got a spring in my step. I'm absolutely sapped. Yeah. And it's like you start going through the footage and you're like, oh, why didn't I do that? Or why didn't I do this?
You sort of review because you feel a bit down. You're sort of reviewing it in like a negative way, not like, oh, look at what we did do. And yeah.
So I try and give myself a buffer of a couple of days just to sort of rest and refuel, and then then go through the footage. And I think it's much easier. But yeah, imposter syndrome, I suffer from it. Yeah, definitely. Like, and I think it happens to all of us, and I think it's almost how you kind of try and deal with that, isn't it? And sort of spin it around and make a positive out of it, and push yourself forward with it. And I think just running a business, your own business is, and being a business of one, it
takes its toll
creeps
sometimes.
In all the time. So it's just trying to push through that, and I think I'm always my own worst critic, but I feel like that also pushes you forward at times, and
100%.
helps you excel. But it's just trying to balance that. We speak all the time, don't we? And we speak with Eric, and we're all in the same boat, aren't we? And I think that's like one of the things about what we do is the people that you get, you're fortunate enough to meet, and like all you guys, it's great to have you, because it's like we're all going through the same thing at the same time. And I think from a business of one, it's nice to have somebody else that's in the same boat.
It's like a colleague.
It's a colleague, because it can be quite isolating, can't it? So,
100%. So I think that's a good place to wrap up. Thank you so much for coming. Episode 1, season 2, completed.
Thank you for having me, mate. It's been a pleasure.
Good. Glad you've enjoyed it. Where can people find you? And obviously, let us know about the guide as well.
Okay, so you can check out zadefilm.shop for wedding work, and for the digital products, you can check out zadefilm.shop.
Cool. What about Instagram?
Instagram, Zade Co on Instagram.
And TikTok?
TikTok.
Soon. Coming soon.
TBC.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.